Hello, I'm Carolyn Wu. I'm a 3-time alumna of Purdue University, 75, 76, and 79. It took multiple tries to get it right. In any case, today I have the privilege of serving as the President's Distinguished Fellow for Global Development. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Scale Up Conference. And how do we scale up agricultural technologies to reach millions so that we could improve the lives of many people and address the issue of food security? Later on, we will have formal welcome as well as acknowledgement from the President. At this point, my job is really to introduce the topic, and I'm going to introduce the topic by way of 3 video stories. These stories will illustrate the different ways we could scale up and have an impact. And these 3 different businesses are at different stages of development. Without further ado, let's watch the videos. And tomorrow, we will have the founders of these businesses talk to us. But let's see the stories. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mitch Daniels, president of Purdue, and it's my very pleasant privilege to open this meeting. I would have that joyful privilege regardless, given the importance of this occasion. But it's doubly satisfying today because, as many of you will know, we have just begun the celebration of Purdue's 150th birthday. And this is really the inaugural meeting of what we expect to be a vibrant year full of intellectual engagement on some of the biggest questions facing our globe. So no better way, really, to begin that celebration in which we'll look back at Purdue's proud past, but we'll look very dominantly ahead to contributions Purdue and its people and its offspring might make, contributions that we might make to a better world in the future. So there's absolutely no better way, no more fitting topic than the one that has brought us all here together. Special welcome to those of you who have come from more than 20 other countries. You have come, if you're newcomers to our school, you have come to one of the most global and international student and graduate student populations and faculty populations anywhere. And I hope you'll feel most welcome and at home here. We're delighted to have you all. Special thanks are due a lot of people, but I'll single out our dear friend and President's Fellow here at Purdue, Dr. Carolyn Wu, for helping us bring this all together. Now, some 3-4 decades ago, fatuous books were being written proclaiming things like, quote, "The battle to feed humanity is over. Hundreds of millions of people, we were told, were going to starve. There was nothing that could be done about it." Well, people at Purdue did not believe that bunk. Norman Warlock did not believe that bunk. You, if you were around at the time, or certainly your predecessors in the pursuits that that now occupy your time, knew better. And a magnificent revolution occurred. And we now live in the best-fed world, in the world with the least poverty of all time. There's much left to do, but there's been never been a time, we all know, in human history of such material uplift as those decades which we were told were going to be so impossibly disastrous. And yet, of course, we know that looking forward, that we now face a challenge on an even greater scale as the planet anticipates the arrival of 2 to 3 billion more people. So yet again, the finest science, the finest technology, the most brilliant applications of new innovations will be necessary, and perhaps on a scale we've not known before. Hence this conference. What topic better fits the place in which it's convened, and what topic is more important to us all as we look forward to the steady, continued improvement of our fellow members of this planet. So, all that said, if there's no better topic to engage on now, if there's no better place I can think of to do it, there's certainly no better person to lead us in that discussion. And the gentleman I'm now about to introduce to you, I'm sure he's well known to each of you. He's a proud product of this university. Dr. Akin Adesina, after a tremendous career that included worldwide acclaim for his effectiveness and corruption fighting as the Nigerian agricultural minister, now with the African Development Bank, our partners in this meeting. And I cannot resist reminding you, Purdue's third World Food Prize winner in a decade. He personifies what I believe to be the spirit of this place, the spirit of this meeting. As proud as we are of the things he's done up to this point in his life, we're equally confident that even greater achievements await him and therefore a grateful world. Please welcome our proud Boilermaker, Dr. Akin Adesina.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, President Mitch Daniels. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Purdue University. You turn to your neighbor and say, "All hail Purdue." I'm really honored to be here to deliver the keynote address at this first ever conference on scaling up agricultural technologies for transformation. I'm delighted to be here with my beautiful, darling wife, Grace. She's always here. I wish to thank you, President Daniels, my dear friend, Dr. J. Akrit, Provost and Executive President for Academic Affairs and Diversity, Dr. Karen Plott, the Dean of Agriculture, Dr. Indrajit Shube, the Associate Dean and Director of International Programs, for inviting me, and of course, to have Caroline Wu here, and also to have Suzanne Nielsen, both of them being the force behind organizing this event. I know that, Caroline, you are a three-time alumni of the university. Please put your hands together. They've done a great job of bringing us here. Allow me to extend hearty congratulations to you, Mr. President, on the 150th anniversary celebrations of Purdue University. That's incredible. It's 150 years of giant leaps for Purdue. When the idea of this conference was first floated last year, I enthusiastically accepted the invitation to deliver the keynote address. What the provost did not know, however, was my main reason for doing so. Well, let me be clear. I will never pass up an opportunity to be back at my great alma mater, to get to see the Boilermakers and visit with many friends and Purdue family, all of which brings back for me very warm memories of my time right here as a graduate student on this beautiful campus. And I heard you all also play great football this year, and that you just played with Boston College, and I thought you won 33 or something, 30-13. You know, oh well, that was one of the great ways to welcome me back. It's indeed great to be back. It is indeed right here, right on this campus, that my interest was sparked on the importance of agricultural technologies in changing the lives of people. It was here as a graduate student that I began the journey of searching for ways to get technologies into the hands of millions of farmers. John Sanders, I don't know if John is here. Where is John? Oh, that's right, okay. John Sanders, my PhD thesis supervisor, used to talk. John, yeah, give it up to John. He used to talk about tide ridges, technologies for water retention in the Sahel. It was all John ever talked about. Whether having coffee, lunch, relaxing with friends or colleagues, if you needed to get John's attention, don't say John, just say Tide Ridges. I just used to wonder, I must say, why, with all we knew, the technologies were not used at the scale that they should have been used. Well, John is quite tenacious and still passionately talks about Tide Ridges, and I'm absolutely sure he is going to be talking to you about Tide Ridges at this conference. It was here that I saw the incredible work of Gebisa Ejeta, who developed the famous Hagendura sorghum variety, which helped farmers to significantly increase yields in Sudan. I recall vividly also the international programs under which I got my graduate training grants, with legends such as Wood Thomas, J.D. Axtell, John D. Axtell, Lowell Hardin, who provided us with opportunities to conduct field research in different countries. Yes, all the seminars of trying to figure out the links between technologies, policies, and economics, and political economy. I was always ever so curious as our professors held brown bag lunch seminars talking about how technologies help to drive the Green Revolution in Asia and Latin America. I had a dream that one day Africa will achieve the same. So when I completed my PhD, I did not want to stay and work in America. I desperately wanted to get right back to Africa and apply what I had learned and embark on my own journey of helping to transform agriculture in Africa. As a young economist at the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, ICRISAT, in 1989, on my first job as a Rockefeller Foundation Social Science Research Fellow, I got my first taste of why technologies do not scale. I had gone out with my colleague, a plant breeder called Noel, to push for farmers in Mali to adopt new sorghum varieties that had been developed by ICRISAT. As we got to the village in Sikasso, in southern Mali, we met the head of the village, and they call them Dugutigi. We enthusiastically informed him, the Dugutigi, and the farmers that we had come with these high-yielding sorghum varieties that would change their lives and give them double the yields on their farms. We had every reason to be excited. We had done farm trials, and the yields were enormously impressive. The Dugutigi took us on a short tour of the village. Everywhere we went, we saw granules filled to the brim with sorghum. After a few pondering moments, during which you could feel a chilling silence that seemed to convey all by what was not spoken, he said, "Does ICRISAT buy sorghum?" "Heck no," I said. "Our role was to get you to adopt and use more high-yielding sorghum varieties." He followed up quickly with rapid fire. "Okay, the day that ICRISAT buys sorghum, you can come back to our village." I don't have to tell you how we all both felt. Sitting quietly in our truck as we drove back to Bamako, the capital city, we pondered the reality that lay right ahead of us. I turned to Noel, my colleague, and said, "We have just learned a great lesson here. The issue was not high yields. The issue was lack of policy incentives and markets for farmers." That lesson, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, has stayed with me ever since in my work to help to address global hunger through getting technologies to scale. And scale we must, for the world is getting hungrier. Yes, there has been much progress on extreme poverty globally. The population living on less than $1.9 a day has declined from 44% in 1990 to under 10% by 2015, according to the World Bank. But we must not get carried away, though. We are not winning the war against global hunger, at least not yet. According to the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World 2017, the number of hungry people in the world increased from 777 million in 2015 to 815 million people in 2016. Climate change is exacerbating this situation, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where the International Food Policy Research Institute estimates that the continent will add an additional 38 million hungry people by 2050 due to climate change. The world witnessed a remarkable development in the 1960s and early 1970s, when cereal yields increased dramatically in Asia and in Latin America. The president was talking about that just a moment ago. With the introduction of short-statured varieties of rice and wheat and accelerated use of fertilizers, mainly under irrigated conditions, cereal production rose. 1 billion people got fed. And God bless Norman Borlaug, he's resting right home. He did his job. And I think it's up to us to carry that baton and do even more than he did. The Asian region, long considered to be under the Malthusian curse, became self-sufficient in food and established itself as a major net food exporting region. It was dubbed the Green Revolution. Rapid decline in the price of food, rise in rural employment, and improved real wages triggered growth multiplier effects and spurred industrial growth. The story is starkly different in Africa, where per capita food production has been declining for decades. Cereal yields average less than 1 ton per hectare, about a quarter of the global average. Population growth rate has continued to outpace agricultural growth, and as a result, Africa suffers high food deficits and relies on imports. Feeding the majority of the poor in Africa and the vulnerable populations while preserving the natural resource base and the environment is one of the most pressing development challenges of the 21st century. The challenge is serious because population growth rates have exceeded the productive capacity of the continent's current food production systems. The population in sub-Saharan Africa is projected to grow from 600 million in 2000 to nearly 1 billion people by 2020. Dire consequences on food security are projected. The International Food Policy Research Institute projections show that Africa is the only region that will experience major food shortages by 2020 and beyond. Malnutrition is projected to rise over the next 20 years. Africa must fully unlock its immense agricultural potential. We are blessed as a continent. The continent has 65% of all the arable land left to feed the world, with 9 billion people by 2050. But Africa, as I would like to say, cannot eat potential. Therefore, what Africa does with agriculture is not only important for Africa, it will also shape the future of food in the world. Despite this enormous potential, Africa spends $35 billion importing food, and if we don't change that, by 2025, that will rise to $110 billion. The continent is importing what it should be producing, creating poverty within Africa and exporting jobs out of Africa. Scarce foreign exchange is used to buy food. Lacking the ability to feed itself, Africa becomes vulnerable and dependent on market forces to feed its burgeoning population. Any shock to global food production will have direct price transmission into Africa, especially in the rural areas, where the percentage, actually, which is quite odd, of net buyers of food is actually quite high, despite that these zones are the ones that can produce food to feed their countries. So investing in agriculture, therefore, makes both economic and security sense. Technologies to achieve Africa's green revolution exist. For the most part, they are just sitting on the shelf. The release of water-efficient maize varieties now allow farmers to harvest good yields in the face of moderate drought, boosting resilience. In fact, today, I met one of the guys working on that. Today, rice varieties exist that can give you 8 tons per hectare. Cassava varieties exist that have yield potential of 80 tons per hectare. Heat tolerance and disease-resistant livestock technologies exist, and also aquaculture technologies exist. The challenge, I think, is lack of supportive policies to ensure that they are scaled up to reach millions of farmers. All Africa needs to do is to harness the available technologies with the right policies and rapidly raise agricultural productivity and the incomes for farmers and assure lower food prices for consumers. We have done lots of piloting of agricultural technologies. Let me see your hand if you have piloted one technology or the other. Yeah, we got lots of pilots in here. Now, what we need to have is a lot of planes taking off. We have lots of pilots, we need a lot of planes. It's time to scale up and take off to achieve transformative impacts. The right policies and incentives matter in scaling up technologies. The extensive uptake of agricultural technologies in developed countries was driven by public support. This includes research and development, subsidizing public universities, such as land-grant universities, to reach out to farm communities, as well as subsidized credit and farm or disaster payment systems. I think I was looking at the figure recently, U.S. Farm Bill, which protects U.S. farmers with disaster payments and farm insurance. U.S. ag subsidies, or you want to call them incentives, cost a whopping $24 billion a year. The Common Agricultural Policy of the European Union essentially provides direct payments that amount to hundreds of billions of dollars. Think about it, UK farmers receive over $4.5 billion annually in direct payments, and there are no more than 150,000 farmers anyway. That provides guaranteed income for 65% of the income. If you go as far as Ireland, that's almost 85% of your income that's actually covered. Now, you tell me, it's no surprise that in developed countries, farmers use modern technologies at scale. Who will not use agricultural technologies given these incentives? However, for decades, there has been numerous debates on the use of subsidies for farmers in developing countries. Indeed, in Africa, subsidies were largely eliminated or substantially reduced due to the structural adjustment programs of the 1980s. Without subsidies, India will not have achieved a green revolution, nor will the rest of Asia or Latin America. Of course, it goes without saying that subsidies were often abused and inefficiently used. But subsidies in themselves are not bad. So canceling subsidies is not the solution. What is needed is to make them work by better targeting them to reach the farmers for which they were intended, just like in developed countries. The challenge is to come up with better delivery systems. With the technologies we have today, rapid use of mobile phones, digital revolution, and blockchains, we should be able to come up with solutions to deliver support to poor farmers in developing countries. African farmers are no different from those in other parts of the world. When they are supported, they will feed their nations. Given the majority of farmers in Africa live under poverty traps, a new approach is needed to release them from these traps and put them on a sustained pathway for income growth. What Africa needs is what I call growth enhancement support. Let me explain it. The world spent trillions of dollars bailing out banks during the global financial crisis. African farmers do not need a bailout, but they definitely need a leg up. That leg up, what I call the growth enhancement support, has two elements. First, a pull effect out of poverty. This will be achieved through targeted public support to farmers delivered through agro dealers. These are your usual mom and pop shops that sell seeds and fertilizers in rural areas, and agribusinesses to allow them to afford new agricultural technologies. Second, a push effect to help farmers run agriculture as a business. I have said agriculture is not a social sector. It is not a development activity. Agriculture is a business. We have a lot of oil, a lot of gas in Africa. I'm yet to see how many people drink the oil. I'm yet to see how many people smoke the gas. I hope they don't. They won't last for long. And so we do need to ensure that we leverage this particular sector as a business. This push effect will be achieved by simultaneously leveraging commercial credit for farmers, agro dealers, and agribusinesses all along the agricultural value chains. Together, these two elements of growth enhancement support will pull farmers out of poverty traps and put them on trajectory of faster and sustainable income growth. A few countries have started to put the growth enhancement support in place with tremendous success. Kenya started the first step with its National Accelerated Agricultural Input Access Program in 2006, With the support from Rockefeller Foundation, I actually was responsible for working with them to do that for the government of Kenya. It provided support for farmers for seeds, fertilizers, and small livestock and small-scale irrigation. The program targeted subsidized farm inputs, which they call Kilimo Plus or Kilimo Bora, to poor farmers, consisting of improved seed fertilizers enough to plant 1 acre or 0.4 hectares. The program rapidly expanded to 100 districts. Now, Simeon Ehui, my friend, is here, my old classmate. I don't know. Hey, Simeon, get up so everybody give you a clap. Come back home. Yeah. Simeon is the director of agriculture, global agriculture for the World Bank. But because I was going to say the World Bank opposed it at that time, but you were not at the World Bank at the time. Purdue grads don't oppose good things like that. But after, I remember the World Bank at first said, no, it's not going to work. But in fact, later on, they came on board with it. They actually put a lot of money to help scale it up to 500,000 farmers. The Alliance for a Green Revolution, AGRA, and the International Fund for Agricultural Development launched the Kilimo Brashara program, which is to use loan guarantees to leverage $50 million from Equity Bank to support smallholder farmers and agricultural value chains. And I remember the guy who was the CEO of Equity Bank came to my office 7:30 in the morning. I said, well, why do we have 2.5 million farmers that can't afford seeds and fertilizers? He said, well, risk of lending to them. I said, well, risk is not a big issue. You manage your downside risk. That's what you do. So what will it take to reduce the risk? And so we put forward $5 million from AGRA as a risk-sharing facility, first loss basis, and it worked. We were able to leverage the Equity Bank to do $50 million of lending all across the agricultural value chain. Just think about the power of leverage. In Tanzania, I remember going out there when I was in Rockefeller Foundation. We established agro-dealers in several districts. We put down also the same amount of money to the bank, National Microfinance Bank of Tanzania, to try and get them to lend to agro-dealers and other agribusinesses. Now, I must say, at that time, the use of fertilizers had dropped in Tanzania. It had declined from 142,000 metric tons in 1991-92 to 77,000 metric tons in 2001 and 2003. But the first step of that growth enhancement support, fertilizer use expanded to 260,000 metric tons by 2005 and 2006. We kicked in with the second step of the growth enhancement support for Tanzania with a loan guarantee of $1 million to leverage $10 million from the National Microfinance Bank of Tanzania. The program was so successful, it grew to $10 million with additional guarantee from the Financial Sector Deepening Trust. $25 million was leveraged additionally from the Standard Bank of Tanzania. The government of Tanzania looked up and said, we can go to scale. And started thinking, let's reach $2.5 million with combined elements of this growth enhancement support. So what am I saying? Combining targeted subsidies for farmers with market-based systems for rapidly expanding access to financing for farmers and agricultural value chains is the fastest way to get many people out of poverty traps to a sustained pathway for economic growth. By focusing on growth enhancement support, governments will be able to unlock poverty traps, transition farmers into higher growth pathways, build private sector linkages, create systemic changes in the alignment of financial markets to support farmers, and achieve a sustainable system for simultaneously meeting food security and income growth objectives. The experience of Nigeria when I was Minister of Agriculture from 2011 to 2015 was particularly innovative. In Nigeria, the government had been buying and selling fertilizers for decades, but only a small fraction of them ever got to farmers. As if the fertilizers I knew, fertilizers have NPK, but somehow the fertilizers we had in Nigeria had more than NPK. They had hands and they had legs. They could walk. They just walked away, away from the farmers. And I remember going out one day and telling Grace, I said, Grace, I'm about to take the most dangerous decision of my career, a priority of my life. I said, we are going to take the bad guys out. And I'm not sure I'm going to be back home. Who knows? If I'm lucky, I'll be back. If not, that's it. And we decided to just simply take the government out. And within 90 days, we took the government out. Some of my colleagues, I think Kola Masha, I heard him speaking earlier on in this thing. It took us 90 days to take the government out. We turned to the power of mobile phones, which is the most important thing in the hand of a farmer today. Listen. And we decided to send farmers vouchers on their mobile phones, electronic vouchers that they will use to buy from private sector instead of buying from the government. It never got to them anyway. Rapid revolution. All of a sudden, the percentage of farmers that were getting subsidized inputs from government rose from 11% to 94%. I remember walking to the north, traveling to the north of Nigeria, and we went to one large irrigated perimeter. And we had all these women walking towards us. And for those of you who knew Nigeria at that time, because of the Boko Haram in the north, the insecurity, they were wearing black powder. And so my security guys were so scared, they said, we're going to get you out of here. I said, no, I don't feel threatened at all, so let's stay. So when all the women came, they came close by, and all of a sudden, they put their hands right back into their pockets. And they reached out and pulled out their mobile phones. And they said, Honorable Minister, we get fertilizers now in our village ourselves, and now the men cannot cheat us anymore. We actually were able to reach 15 million farmers over that period of time. And I must say the government saved a whopping $188 million from the efficiency of the new system in the provision of subsidy interventions of fertilizers, seeds, and services. If you look at what happened, food production increased in that period by an additional 21 million metric tons of food. So that convinces me that if you have the right technologies in the hands of the right people, the farmers can do wonders. It's very important, but we can't let corruption have its way. Now, as the bank, at the African Development Bank, we're now expanding this electronic wallet system to several countries, including Liberia, Togo, Benin, Kenya, and Malawi. The World Bank, Simeon and their crew, they're doing a great job. They've actually extending that to Afghanistan as we speak. So scaling up agricultural technologies in a sustainable way will also need that we take a demand-side approach, not a supply-side approach. This is especially the case for staple crops that are bulky and easily perishable. Take the case of cassava, for which Africa produces a large share of global output. Unless it's processed within 24 hours of harvesting, it degrades and you lose its quality. I recall again my experience as Minister of Agriculture when faced with the challenge of how to support cassava farmers with high-yielding technologies. With rapid adoption of high-yielding varieties, the average yields on farmers' field rose from 12 to 15 tons per hectare to 20 tons per hectare. But farmers were losing money very fast. I remember going out and seeing some farmers that said, sorry, we cannot harvest the cassava. The labor cost of harvesting it is so high that we are not going to make any money, so we just leave it underground. And so I thought to myself, what in the world are we going to do? Because the economics did not work out. We took the decision that we had to create markets quickly for cassava. Look, we decided to use cassava as composite flour for making bread. Well, you know, I like it when it says, man shall not live by bread alone. But I think God didn't have wheat bread alone in mind. Bread you can make from all kinds of stuff, you know. So we decided that we should use high-quality cassava flour mixed with wheat flour to make bread. I met stiff resistance from wheat importers, as you will expect. I was called a minister that was going to create a lot of diabetes in Nigeria. In fact, So powerful was the lobby that somebody stood up in Parliament and read the first bill, the second motion, and the third motion, all standing. And they agreed that the policy was bad. Well, it was actually not our policy. There was no law. They were just trying to make sure that we will not legislate something like that, to just tell you the extent to which people can go. So I had to come out and had a meet with the press in Nigeria, and I said, well, take a look. Let's look at the glycemic index of foods. Glycemic index of white quality cassava flour, wheat flour, and all types of food. And you look at white wheat flour, it was anything close to about 77%. Cassava flour was way down, about 50-something%. So you mix them together, you have the composite index is much better. So it is actually much more nutritious. That was how we started. But it's not easy. An uncle of mine was one of the biggest importers in Nigeria. And I went to the president's office. We were waiting to see the president. So here we were. We were in the restroom. He was using one urinary, I was using the other. And I looked at him, and I said, sir, how much money do you need in your life? And he was looking at me bewildered. I said, if you make $1 more, it doesn't make a difference. All I'm asking you to do is mix 10% of cassava flour to your wheat, and we will make many farmers rich and scale things up. And he quickly finished and ran away. But the good story is, about 2 years down the line, he actually, in his company, launched their first high-quality cassava flour and wheat flour, composite flour. And when he was speaking, Grace and I were there. He said, I wish I had listened to you years ago, because actually the bread is better, it's cheaper. And we are actually creating a lot of markets for our farmers. This is what we had to do. And just to give you a little bit of another story on why it was so important, politics matters when you want to scale up technologies. I took this bread, I rushed into cabinet meeting, and I put bread all over the tables of all the ministers. And the secretary to the government came in and said, who put bread in, who is desecrating the hallowed chambers? They say it's the Minister of Agriculture. Well, of course, I had called the president. I was going to do this. You don't do that, you get fired. And so, but the secretary of the government came and he took all the bread. He took them out. When the president came in, he said, Akin, where's the bread? I said, the secretary to the government took the bread out. He said, bring the bread back in. And so he took the bread and he broke it and he started giving, it's almost like eating Holy Communion or something. And he said, this is all the bread I'm ever going to eat, to create local demand and give the confidence if your president can eat it and stay alive, then it means it's good. And I must tell you, it was one of the most amazing things I've seen in terms of political support behind something. All of a sudden, we had to distribute. Martin Fregena is right here. Stand up, Martin. Martin was my... And Martin and their team distributed 130 million stems of improved cassava varieties for farmers. That industrial shift happened, and it created an uplift of the use of cassava varieties. Let me say also that partnerships matter. When I was in Rockefeller Foundation, one of the things we decided was we needed to build bigger partnerships with universities, with research technology centers and all others, and that led to the creation of Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, together with the Rockefeller Foundation. Bill and Melinda put in $250 million to support, and Gebisa Ejeta was there in the beginning when AGRA was launched. I want to say that right now, at the African Development Bank, we're following up on that. We put up $24 billion for agriculture over the next 10 years. At the core of what we are trying to do is to develop better policies, markets, infrastructure, and institutions that will drive agricultural value chains. We have launched something that is called Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, or called TAAT. Simeon Ehuing, World Bank, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, and also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will put this out. And what essentially is TAAT. Now, let me see how many breeders we have here. Oh, can I see? Plant breeders, yeah. Okay, when you take a variety, you test it in one location 4 years. You go to another country, you test it another 4 years. So the same technology that can reach 10 countries in 4 years takes 40 years to get there. But if you look at what we are doing wrong, it's that they are all in the same agroecological band. When you talk of this is this band and that is that band. And so why not just simply break the barriers down and make sure the technologies go across the agroecological zones? And that's what TAT is actually doing, breaking down those barriers. Insects don't take visas. They just move all across at will. So technologies don't need borders, so we can move. And that's what we are doing with TAT. And we're targeting TAT to reach 40 million people, farmers, to impact 200 million people. And I want to say we are so proud of the work we are doing now to tackle the fall armyworm. As you know, it's a major problem that we have in Africa. This year, the African Development Bank is putting $20 million for control the fall armyworm. That will reach 15 million farmers. And next year, we will ramp that up to 35 million farmers by the end of next year. Let me say a few things about the issue of finance. Limited access to finance and high interest rates have continued to hamper the scaling up of agricultural technologies. Agricultural development banks set up to address this in the past have been colossal failures due to elite capture, poor business models, lack of understanding of agricultural value chains, and non-sustainable subsidized interest rates. Commercial banks are awash with liquidity, rarely lend to the agriculture sector. And when they do, the interest rates are extremely high, while the credit duration is so short, leaving the sector without access to affordable long-term finance. At the core of that problem is risk. And I remember when I was, we've done a lot of force loss things, and Bertrand and your group, USAID as well, have done some of that. But when I got to Nigeria, I felt, why can't we work at scale? I walked up to the central bank governor, and I said, Mr. Governor, can you put aside for us $350 million to de-risk the lending to all the banks in Nigeria, to agriculture? And I called a meeting of all the chief risk officers of the banks. It was a crazy thing to do. So we were in the room, and I said, give me the probability distribution of loss if you are lending to agriculture. Well, the hands went up. If we lend to agriculture, we will lose 90%. If we lend to agriculture, we will lose 100%. And I say, well, you're still lending. If you're lending and you're losing 90%, and you're lending and you're losing 100%, it means you're lending to your friends. And so we set up this facility to de-risk the sector. We fix the agricultural value chain, make sure that if you're lending to somebody producing tomatoes, you're also lending to somebody processing the tomatoes so that you have a closed loop. And then you de-risk the agriculture and the financial value chains itself. And we did that. You know what happened? We leveraged 10 times that. That's $3.5 billion into a sector that people said you couldn't lend to. And what was amazing was that the share of total bank portfolio that was in the agriculture sector went from 0.7% when we started to 5% over a 4-year period. Of course, I'm sure you will ask how much of that got lost. Less than 1% got lost. I've been minister 4 years. I've been president of the African Development Bank 3 years. The program is still going on. The loss rate is still less than 1%. So that tells me that it's the perception of risk that is excessively high when it comes to agriculture. And so we have to be able to deal with that particular problem. Now we are scaling that up significantly in many countries. Now Mezwe is here. Mezwe, it's so that when you have questions, you can ask these people. That's why I'm asking them to get up. Mezwe is CEO of a fund called, a Fund for Agricultural Finance in Nigeria, FAFIN. And I remember we found that the agribusinesses could not have access to long-term capital. And so we created this Fund for Agricultural Finance in Nigeria as a private equity fund. And I went to the government, took government money, and put it up for private investment. Of course, some of the senators say, gee, what are you doing? I said, well, we're trying to make agriculture work. What's the money doing here anyway? And so we set it up, and today I think it was about $33 million when we started. Today I think you're about 76 or so million. Have you risen from that? Still $76 million. Yeah. So all I'm trying to say is that we must combine agricultural finance with equity financing if we are going to be able to scale technologies up, in Africa. Let me also say, to scale up, policies are needed critically to create incentives for value-added processing to all the staple crops we have. The size of that staple crop market in Africa is huge. It's $150 billion a year. But we lose a lot of what we actually produce. So the greatest gains to agricultural transformation will come from expanding regional markets for staple crops. The same lesson I learned 29 years ago in the village experience with the Dukutigi in Mali. Value-added processing will not only raise incomes of farmers, it will stabilize price for staple crops, as well as reduce losses and stimulate multiplier effects in local economies. What is needed is what I call staple crop processing zones, or simply called SCPZs. These zones will be vast areas in rural areas, set aside and managed for agribusinesses and food manufacturing industries and other agro-allied industries. They will be enabled with the right policies, infrastructure, road, energy, irrigation, rail, ICT, ports, and what have you. Governments will be asked to provide fiscal incentives for food processing and agro-allied industries to move into the SCPZs, just like the export processing zones. They will be managed by dedicated agencies. They will provide several advantages all across rural Africa. They will create markets for farmers' produce. Raw materials will no longer be moving out of rural areas. You will have Africa able to take a leg up in agro-allied industry, value addition processing to everything that we produce. They will create jobs all across rural areas, and they will reduce rural to urban migration. They will attract finance because you are bringing finance into a closed loop where it's quite easy for finance to be able to operate. And I think that while agribusinesses and agro-allied industries should do this, I must give a caveat, though. It's that we cannot allow land grab to happen in Africa because farmers must have titles to their land and be able to negotiate a lot with how the agribusinesses will operate. Today, the bank is doing staple crop processing zones in Ethiopia, in Togo, in Democratic Republic of Congo and Mozambique. We expect to reach 15 countries in the next few years, working closely with Simeon and their team at the World Bank. Don't forget, it was this kind of special economic zones that allowed China to be able to grow and lift literally hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, except that this time we are focusing on where the poor people are. They are in rural Africa. And that's where you're going to have the greatest impact in transforming lives of people. So let me summarize as I close. Achieving agricultural transformation by taking technologies to millions of farmers requires three things: strong political will, the power of science and technology, and sound policy incentives. It was the combination of strong political will, science and technology, and policy incentives that helped India to support its farmers, taking a nation that was once said to be the burden of Asia to become self-sufficient in food production in a very short period of time. The sustained political will of leaders of China, backed by science and technology and policy incentives, which included, of course, rights to land, access to markets, drove massive agricultural transformation in China. The result? 700 million people were taken out of poverty within 10 years. So today, as we all gather here to think about how to scale up technologies to reach hundreds of millions of people, let us remember these three powerful forces, which I call the scaling up triangle: science and technology, policy and incentives, and political will. Wherever you find the scaling up triangle, agricultural technologies will inevitably go to scale. Let's go out and make the scaling up triangle happen for Africa, for Asia, and for the Caribbeans, across the developing world, which has the bulk of the world's poor still locked in poverty in rural areas. We can, ladies and gentlemen, end the situation of 1 billion people hungry in the world. We can end global poverty, which affects over 1 billion people whose daily income cannot even buy a hamburger. We owe it to ourselves and to generations to come to use every opportunity at our disposal to make the world a better place. Right here at Purdue University, let us chart a transformative way of doing business to scale agricultural technologies. That's the Purdue Boilermaker visionary spirit, the same that sent 24 Purdue-trained astronauts to space, including Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. The Boilermaker visionary spirit of Purdue agriculture, where 3 World Food Prize winners, Phil Nelson, Gebisa Ejeta, and myself, in declining age as I go, were trained, and the only school in the world to have this achievement. Purdue University, a place that sparks ideas. So from here, let's take on the Boilermaker spirit and shoot for the stars. Let us reach 1 billion people with agricultural technologies and watch the shining scaling up triangle glow all across the world. That will make us and the Dugu-Tigiris very happy. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
My gosh, it's a great day for Boilermakers. Make me so very proud. Thank you very much, Dr. Adesina. Thank you. Let's give him a big hand. And what a challenge to start the next 150 years. And so today we're just delighted that all of you are here to help us kick off this event and the celebration of the 150th birthday of Purdue University. For the participants of this conference, now is time for reception and dinner. Just a few instructions. The reception and dinner would be at Ross 8 Stadium at the Shively Club. Along the way, those of you who would like to walk, we have students who will be guiding you. There are those of you who may want to drive, and there is parking near Ross 8. And also there are 2 buses which will run a loop, multiple shuttles. And I think each bus takes 50-some people, so we think that just a couple of rounds. So those of you who want to take the bus, just take the entrance here and the west entrance. We are in the west lobby, so it's the west entrance where we will have the bus. And when we get there, and after our reception and dinner, we'll also have instructions for coming back. So again, thank you very much. What an incredible vision, so achievable, and it requires truly the spirit of the Boilermakers. Thank you very much.